Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Where Do We Go Now is over. It's time to talk to Nassim. He's in the well.
بطت اجري انا بتفصل 3 من عائلتهم.
Нарежешь, прожаришь, начинишь и запаришь, помесишь, покрутишь, тут подсыпешь. يلا نقدر شربت اسماء الموزة شايرة أو سمرة خليها شي والله. Hello guys.
Where do we go now, Andy? This is once again part of our 10-year series.
10-year anniversaries, yes.
Why did we pick this one?
10 years ago, it was made.
No, I mean, I know that, but there's like a bazillion movies that were made 10 years ago. Why did we choose this one?
You ask this every time.
I know, because you're the one who is the encyclopedic memory of these things.
I don't remember, basically what happened is we put a list of movies down and we looked at the ones that had the highest ratings on probably IMDb, Letterboxd, those sorts of things, and said, okay, let's do these ones. I think we'd only heard of like 2 or 3. So, we figured it would be a good opportunity to explore some films from filmmakers from around the world with films we hadn't heard of before.
And we sure did. This was a complete surprise on the list. Had not heard of it. It was not on my list at all. This was a completely new to me movie thanks to the next reel. So that's very exciting.
Had you seen anything by Nadine Labaki before?
I don't believe so. Had you? Are you a big Labaki head?
Yes, and I think we are coining that term, and we need to make a shirt. the Labaki head shirt, clearly. I had only seen the film that she directed that was nominated for a Best Foreign Language Film Oscar in 2018, I think, called Capernaum. It was about a 12-year-old boy who's serving a sentence in jail who sues his parents for neglect, which led him to the place that he is. And it was an interesting film. It was kind of a unique story. It wasn't my favorite of the nominees, but I still enjoyed the film. But I didn't go into it looking at it to see a Nadine Labaki film because I wasn't a Labaki head at the time. I guess maybe now I am a Labaki head, but I mean, it certainly is an interesting film, definitely worth checking out. And so, it was touching. I think she knows how to tell touching stories about people. So it's definitely worth checking out for people who enjoyed this film.
You just outed yourself. I can't believe you did it, but you did it.
Did I?
I was about to ask you, what did you think of this movie? Or what did you think I think of this movie? In preparation for telling you what you thought of the movie, but you said now you're a Labaki head. So you outed yourself, and now I know. And now there's no, I mean, as a storyteller, you should know that sort of anticipatory conflict is at the heart of story, and you just ruined it.
But also, one of the parts of story, especially thrillers, is twists and turns, and you just don't know. Are they actually saying what they mean, or is there something else to that story?
That's subversive. What do you think I thought of this movie? I
think more film reviews need to be like this, where are they telling the truth? Should I be believing what they're saying?
Everybody loves in their movie critics unreliable narrators. It's just a real favorite. What did you think I thought of this movie?
I think you enjoyed it. I don't think you loved it, but I think you found it to be an interesting story with interesting characters looking at a difficult type of conflict going on. I guess that's what I thought.
Okay. That's interesting. I think you thought, oh dear. I'm torn because I think you really liked it. And I think you obviously are a Labaki head, a Labook, as we say, we shorten it. But I don't think I do think that you will find quibbles in the film. I think you will find quibbles, but I don't know why. I just don't know why.
All right,
he says, spoiling his own opinion.
That's right. Well, where do we go now? When it was released here in the U.S., was rated PG-13 for thematic drug material, some sensuality, and violent images. Do you want to watch this movie and help us out? Well, if you see an Apple or Amazon link to this movie in the show notes, just click on it. That will take you right to their site, and you can rent or buy the movie. When you do this, we get a little tiny piece in return.
We are featuring audio reviews from you when you send us your 30-second audio review to reviews@truestory.fm. Once you watch the film, we might just showcase your voice on this show. We want to do more of them. Send them in. We've started receiving them, but they're for movies months down the road. Check us out. Check out our upcoming watch list over on Letterboxd, and you'll be able to see what's coming up so you can get your review in on time. We really, really want to hear your voices on the show. Again, reviews@truestory.fm.
And like Pete said, if you want to find that list, it's in our HQ page over on Letterboxd. That's letterboxd.com. And if you want to get a discount on your pro or patron membership, just use the discount code NEXTREEL. Or you can go to thenextreel.com/letterboxd and you'll get that 20% off. And it works for renewals as well.
And if you haven't explored it and you think, hey, I'm listening to this podcast right now, but it would have been really great if I could listen to it 2 weeks ago when it was actually recorded, we actually have a way to do that. You could join us as a supporting member of the Next Reel family of film podcasts at truestory.fm. And once you become a member, you get access to our live stream recordings. You get access to the super secret channels in our Discord community. You get just that warm feeling of supporting independent podcasts along with all of those fantastic bonus episodes, live streams, and the community. So check out what comes with that with the membership stuff. It's really great, and bonus episodes, right, Andy? Bonus episodes.
Oh boy, I tell you, I feel like I'm buried in bonus episodes right now.
You're buried in bonus episodes.
Yeah. I mean, at the time we're recording this, our monthly Flick Chart re-ranking episode just came out, and we've got our later at the end of the month, we'll have our member bonus episode. It's going to be the members voted, and it is a return to our Spike Lee series. We're going to be looking at his film Malcolm X, and so that will be coming out at the end of the month. So yeah, I mean, just every month. Got the Flick Chart re-ranking. We got a member bonus episode. Plus, we got our retake episode that we do at the end of each series. Just so much stuff. So many.
It's just
episodes.
a lot. It's a real tapestry. So check it out. TrueStory.fm/TNR membership to learn more about the membership tiers. The most it'll cost you is $5 a month or $55 a year. Where do we go now, Andy? Poor Nassim.
Back to Nassim in the well.
The thing about Nassim, the thing about just in general this movie, it is a fascinating setting, right? In this village, in the middle of a country that is torn asunder by war, by holy war, right? Essentially a religious conflict. But it's such a lens on this tiny community, the micro community of the women in this village trying to hold everything together. I found it deeply moving and not at all as sad as I expected it to be. I think the marketing kind of fails this movie because it's legit funny.
Oh no, I think the marketing works because the marketing, like I said last week, like the trailer, like it's very funny and it has the musical and everything, but it's the images. Like if you just look at images of the film, it's all of the women in their black outfits on their way to, bury another, or to the cemetery to kind of like pay respects to the dead. And so it was like so dark, like all of these images. I'm like, ooh, this is going to be a dour watch about all this. But like, yeah, the trailer and everything else. I mean, it really does kind of like have a very joyful feel, which I think was a big surprise for me too. Like I just did not expect that out of this film based on looking at all those images.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I actually went in having not watched the trailer. So all I had seen was, and a lot of the stills, the women in black stills are from the opening, the opening
first
sequence.
5 minutes of the film.
First 5 minutes of the film. And it feels pretty dark. And yet I don't understand it. It feels like I'm peeking in someplace that could very well be a cultural norm, but the whole slapping of their chests and dipping, doing the little dip and the sidestep in unison together, that's like introducing us to the musical flair of the movie, right? Like that's not a thing.
No,
you have to learn how to do.
I mean, I can't speak to it because I haven't been there before to Lebanon, but yeah, my sense is that was purely the film, Nadine Labaki, letting us know that, hey, this is going to be a musical. There's a magical realist element to this as we have these sorts of moments. And it became like this dance of mourning that this group of women were doing all in black as they were walking to the cemetery. And I don't know. For me, setting the film up that way, which came out of nowhere. It was really unexpected because at first I was like, oh, okay, interesting. They're all walking in sync. But then it became so deliberate, and there was a beat, and there was the slapping of the chest with the photos and like everything. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. They're doing something else here. And it really, I don't know. It just took me by surprise. And right away, that kind of pulled me in.
It is that little bit of a tease that introduces us to a world that is, it looks like, a small Lebanese village, but really we're in some sort of a fantastical place, right? The place that's just adjacent to our lived experience of this war-torn sort of countryside, and I thought that was really touching. I think I just want to shout out that Nadine Labaki also played Amal, and she's just terrific.
Yeah,
I thought she was a terrific performer, and I think this was competently directed. So if it isn't clear, I really liked this movie quite a bit. Really, really did. And I think that its handling of this outside perspective of the Christian and Muslim conflict as it is isolated in this village successfully, to me, made the men look appropriately stupid and the women look just incredibly beautifully generous of their heart and spirit, that they went to such lengths to soften the men's experience with each other, because they didn't have to, and it was an exercise of grief and love to do it. And what purpose do the men really serve anyway, right? Like it's such an act of grace that they go to these lengths to save their village and save their community, that I thought it was really touching. Am I in line at all with your thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I do think it's important to just clarify when we say it's just kind of a remote village. I mean, it's remote, but it's also isolated in a way where there are landmines all around. There's only a small bridge in or out that is a relatively safe way to kind of like cross over to the more inhabited areas. They have very little signal. Like, it was difficult in the beginning of the film to see, it took them some time to try getting the TV for the village finally set up so people could kind of see the outside world. But largely it's Rokus and Nassim, who are the two boys who every day they go out of the village to sell stuff that people made, and then to bring back other merchandise that gets sold in the stores there. And so they've created, so the way that the story is designed, which I think in kind of creating, I don't know if I want to call it a parable, but it's a type of story where this group is incredibly isolated. They don't necessarily get the kind of what's happening in the outside world, all the conflict and strife going on in Lebanon between the Muslims and Christians. This group is relatively kind of, dealing with themselves and finding a way to get along, largely because of they're kept away from those outside influences most of the time. But there are still things that rise, and that's where I think it gets interesting, and that's what I think Labaki and her co-writers wanted to say here is like, let's create this bubble and see how we can figure out how to kind of craft this world without as many outside influences. Because I think if the outside influences were coming all the time, I don't think you would be able to kind of tell the story as effectively, because then you'd have constant Muslim and Christian fighting because of all those other outside influences. Does that make sense?
100%. 100%. The isolation is what breeds the ridiculousness when we need it to be ridiculous. And in fact, no one inside, as much as they bicker and fight and wrestle in the streets and steal each other's hats as a joke, like, there is no other serious violence in the village. The violence comes from outside. Nassim is killed from the outside, not from the inside. And clearly, I think the women are protecting their village from the outside coming in, right? They're hiding the news from the men. They're, making sure that the television doesn't work after a little while. They're trying to do all kinds of things to protect them from the ultimate violence of taking one another's lives over religion. And so they're doing it by, hiding the things that they feel are, need to be hidden, and showcasing the things that need to be demonstrated. Like when they all, I get at the end, they all just sort of swap religions, which, you're living with the enemy now. What are you going to do? Right? What do you do? And it absolves everything. I thought that was really touching.
It was. And what I found so interesting, and I think the reason that the film ended up kind of elevating even another notch for me, was the very end of the film, as they are finally burying Nassim, and they get to the cemetery, and all the men are carrying, the body, and then there's, the whole group behind, and the men stop and they turn around, and then they ask the titular question, where do we go now? Like, which side do we take him to? And I couldn't help but think that's also a comment on the fact, on just the reality. It's like, what is next? Is there a next, or is it inevitable that they're going to eventually start fighting again? And they can't come to a decision to just be one. And I don't know, for me, that's the way I kind of took the ending. And it just, I don't know, I found it to be a little twist, kind of like a little bit of a darker reality that we were glimpsing there. But I found it to be that much more powerful, looking at it that way. I don't know. Is that just me that read it that way?
No, I don't think it's you that read it that way. That's how I took it too. That sort of like we're changed as a result of the experience. That's what we want out of our movies. I thought that was a great way to sort of demonstrate that.
But I thought it was a darker element too. Did you see any darker element there?
Well,
because I mean, yes, they've changed, but at the same time, it's like, is it going to last? Because it's like they still can't come together at the end there. They're like, well, I don't know. Like, what's next? And it just seemed very unsure. Like, they just seemed like, well, I don't know. I don't know what the next steps are here.
Well, okay. No, then I disagree. Because I do think that there is some sort of I like the confusion at the end, but it's not necessarily that I think there is, Andy, you're really wicked. Why do you plant that? I can feel my brain adapting to that suggestion, and I don't love it. When I saw it, when I watched it, it was this like, okay, we're new. We have an opportunity to create something new of our village, of our sort of experience here. And I don't know where we go here. Somebody's going to make that call. So for me, it was somebody, probably the village women, coming and saying, put him anywhere, because it no longer matters. It no longer matters which side of the cemetery we put this body, right? He is a loved brother of the village and son of the village, and nothing matters. And now you're saying it's not going to last because they don't know what they're doing, and that hurts my heart. I prefer my way. I know. Absolutely,
I go straight to the Graduate ending, where it's like, it's unsure. We're not getting a clear ending.
It's unsure. It's over.
It's ending on the question.
Not clear. Must be bad. No way hope could spring from this. Do you think they were actually? Do you think they were actually singing and dancing, or that it was potentially a shared group delusional fantasy?
Well, there's 3 musical numbers. We've got, if you count the open, which it's setting us up for a musical. There's no singing, but it definitely has kind of a dance vibe.
We have the big number at the end with the
cooking the hashish biscuits. And then
do you count the showgirl thing that night? Like, do you count that as a separate musical number?
It's kind of was happening at the same time. So it's kind of one sequence.
Yeah. That feels to me like a very real musical number in the thing. But I am torn, because Amal's fantasy.
That felt very joyous.
Amal's fantasy sort of sequence when she's watching him.
Rabeh.
And the ladder swings, and it's a lovely little discretion. That was just in her head.
Well, both of their heads. Like, I felt both Amal and Rabet were both, they were having mutual fantasies about the other, because they both clearly were drawn to each other.
Very much crushing.
Yeah, they were totally crushing on each other. And so that to me was a very much in your head musical moment, whereas the other ones felt a little more present, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed these moments. I thought they worked very well in context of where they were. And yeah, I mean, the question is, Ben in our forum is asking, or made the comment, I wish there was a greater commitment to making this a musical, but I also don't know how musical numbers would play when it gets darker. Do we need more music to this, or just having these few moments, is that enough? I kind of think, for me, I felt like it was fine. I didn't feel like it needed to be a full blown musical throughout the whole piece. Did you? Or did you?
No, I didn't. I do get that point, because there is a certain sort of walking the line-ness of it, where it almost feels uncertain about whether or not it's kind of a musical universe. But for me, I also was more in line that up until the big dance scene at the end, that this was not a community of singers, that this was more idealistic, this was more aspirational, this was more, we're going to use song in the film to demonstrate who our attitudes of the world, and not necessarily make it a full-blown, we're going to tell narrative through song. I didn't need any more than that. I felt like it was just enough of a taste to lighten the mood of a film that could have been very dark.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, this is kind of this story about the conflict, this kind of never-ending conflict between religions and kind of these different mindsets that come with them, just about each other's beliefs, and how dark it can turn, and how malicious people within them can become. And what I found interesting about the film was we have these things happen. Somebody let the goats into the temple. We don't ever really know who. There are certain things that happen. I guess we see the cross get broken. Like, there are certain things that happen that we just don't see, and then they talk about them. But it's like, clearly some people are doing some stuff maliciously, but I don't think it's ever to the point where we're going to start an all-out war. But clearly that is what happens. I mean, there are people in these religious groups who do feel the need to take it out and turn it into a war. And I guess that's why, looking at this story from the perspective of all the women in the villages, of all the mothers and all the wives and all the sisters, and seeing all these people as people, and not necessarily just defined by their religion, but saying, you know what, let's find a way to live together in harmony, instead of all this fighting just because of our ideologies. I felt like it was such a strong way to approach the story, and the music, for me, was a huge benefit of that, of helping create. I mean, we already talked about kind of creating this bubble of an environment that we're in, and the music also helped kind of create this space that we're in, that the whole thing did have this magical realism type of feel to it. And I think that's why it enhances all of those elements and makes it work all the more for me.
Yeah, it also highlights, it's sort of a frivolity that highlights the silliness of the in-village frustrations between the men, right? I mean, at no point did we get any sense that we were leading to, somebody shooting Archduke Ferdinand. Like, this was not the beginning of World War I. This was, we stole a hat. And we're just really mad at there's so much tension in the air that we're so mad that we could use any excuse. We're just looking for any excuse to fight. And the music absolves some of that tension in the narrative for us, I think, as the audience, to soften to some of those other things that could be frustrating to watch. Because when it matters, when it really counts, that we feel strongly about something, is the death of Nassim, that I have been taking not seriously heretofore, but at this point, I shall say, it was a serious and moving moment for me when Nassim comes back, when they come back on the motorcycle and Nassim is dead. And we have that experience of grief of the mother holding her son in the gravel street and then having to say, we have to hide this.
Yeah.
We cannot tell Issam what is going on here, because if we do, he will get the guns and he will kill somebody.
Yeah.
That was excruciating. As a parent, as an audience member, it was excruciating. And I thought a very powerful moment in the film, lowering Nassim into the well. Oh, God.
It's a very dark, well, all of that was like, and it was very difficult to watch. Like when the mother forces her kid to come over and apologize for having taken Nassim's hat. And like that whole scene where, mom is terrified that they're going to discover what's actually going on and, tells everybody that he's got the mumps and makes them apologize through the door and says he has a sore throat. He can't, like, it was nerve wracking watching all of that stuff because you knew at some point somebody's going to figure it out. And so, being there with mom, wanting to tell everybody what happened, but she can't. And so she has to kind of create this facade. I mean, that was incredibly difficult. And then when her son does come home and does discover the truth, then having to raise a gun to your own son and shoot him in the leg to stop him from doing from going to war. I mean, wow, that mom had so many things that she had to go through over the course of the story. I mean, it was a really difficult journey for her.
Well, and in the story that's ostensibly about war, where her son dies from a bullet, the only actual gunshot we see in the movie is the mother turning the gun on her own son.
Yeah.
Which, again, elevates the weight of what she believes ideologically she is protecting her village from erupting into something that could tear it completely apart.
Right.
That's how all wars are started too, right? It's hats. Besides Ferdinand, we've got that. It's somebody stole a hat.
Somebody stole a hat.
And it escalated.
Or put a goat in the temple. Right.
That's right.
Going back to the end, I was just looking at Wikipedia, and they have this as the kind of the end of their plot. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe there is something here. Nassim's funeral then goes peacefully, and then the movie ends with the men looking to the women for direction. When I look at that, I'm like, okay.
Oh, does that make you feel bad? You should feel bad.
No, I do feel bad, but I also feel better about like the end of the film, because as I look at that, I'm like, okay, this is what I think now as I think about it, I think that, I probably went to too dark a place with my version of the ending.
Yeah.
But hey, I still think that there's valid points to approach it from that way. But the fact that it is the men who turn to the women finally to get advice and to ask them what's next, I think that that's the growth that the men needed in the film. And you get to that end and the men say, where do we go now? And leaving it to the women. And I mean, sure, we don't get the actual response. And so that's where probably my own issue is with that. But it is the men turning to the women to say, what's next? And asking for help figuring things out.
Wait a minute. You're frustrated because it's uncertain? Because you don't hear the women say anything? You, Andy, are frustrated with the uncertainty at the end of a movie?
I know, right? I know. Who have I become, Pete?
Do you even hear this?
I'm not frustrated. I'm just saying.
We're recording
You can
right?
read it in a number of different ways. And I guess that's if what she's trying to say is that the men are looking to the women for direction. Yes, I mean, you get that. Okay, you're right. You don't need to hear the answer from the women. I'm going through a lot of emotions right now.
It feels like you are. This is a real turmoil. You've made it better for me in so many ways.
No, it's strong, and that's what I find it so interesting about the film, that they're taking this gendered perspective of this topic, and they're basically saying the women are the ones who are able to get past this. Why can't the men? Why do the men have to keep turning to war every time there's a disagreement? And that turn that the women take at the end. I mean, it's interesting to see. Like, I never never knew where this film was going. And that I always love, because it's exciting when I'm like, I don't know what is going to happen next. And we get to that place where the men wake up from their hashish dazed kind of drug biscuits that the wives cooked for them, and all the women have changed clothes, and they're basically saying, if you want to fight, you have to go through me. And that, to me, like, that is the moment. Like, it's such a powerful way to kind of spin this and to put a whole new perspective on that conflict that, again, I found really powerful.
I did too. I feel I feel like the movie it's dancing on this line of tone, and it's a hard line to walk. Leaving us in a sense of uncertainty is just a reminder that there are very real issues at work between the Christians and the Muslims hating each other. What works about this movie is that we're looking at it under such a microscope that we don't actually get to see the broader conflict outside of this village. We just get hints of it, as you said, the mines surrounding the village, the single road leading in and out that is like the careful rails that you have to stay between, like all of those things. And so it works for me that, that she has taken that story and put it in such a small place to allow us to actually see in isolation the individuals that have to both live and choose to hate each other if they do that. So let me just turn our attention from the hints of comedy and fantasy in the movie to broad comedy, the actual exotic dancers that come to the men.
Yes.
How well does that, to what degree does that work for you, if at all? Like that if you boil down, like as we take this movie and we peel apart all the layers of this particular onion, that it boils down to, we can solve the world's problems with a little sex and innuendo.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I mean, there's an element of Lysistrata, I think, is the one, right? The person who ended a war by denying sex.
Yeah, I think so.
There's an element of that here. It's interesting, and that's what I enjoyed about the film, is the women never knew what was going to work. They just kept trying things, right? It starts with a miracle. Mm-hmm. They start with creating a faux miracle that the Virgin Mary is crying blood, and the mayor's wife is having a vision of ending this conflict before it goes too far, which doesn't work. And so, yeah, then they hire this group of exotic dancers to come pretend that their bus broke down just outside of town, and they have to stay here for a week while their bus gets fixed. It's interesting, and I guess in the realm of the story, it's creating temptation for the men just to take their mind off things. I mean, it's an element that doesn't work as well for me, but I still think it was interesting. I enjoyed those elements within the story. That idea, I just don't think ever quite worked quite as well as the ending for me.
I like it because of the drug stuff. Like, the drug stuff make it funny, right? That this was the extent to which they have to go to actually get the men to see each other and then, have this experience of a big party. It's an interesting thing because, there's so many stories of, the band gets lost in a small village. It's, a Doc Hollywood kind of a story. It's, something happens. And we get to see mostly the story from the perspective of the village, which I like. We don't ever really get enough of even though the women are living there, they aren't really used enough. We have one scene where one of them is sent in to plant a cassette recorder in the room, so that they can start spying on the men.
Mostly, it's just like we see like their struggles in like, this one can't sleep because she has to sleep on the floor, and so she unplugs the fridge.
She unplugs the fridge.
So
right.
We see like those sorts of things, which is more about them and less about what they were brought for.
And to that extent, it feels like much of the integration of the dancers in the community it wasn't as effective for me as I felt like it could have been. Like, if we're going to do that, let's beef up the movie just a little bit and tell a little bit more of a story, or let's find a way to use them in the community in a more effective way. I think that could also have been a distraction to the fact that the people who really are looking to save this movie are the women of the village, and outsiders can't do it, right? Ultimately, as I'm watching the men like eat their breads and get high, I kept thinking, why do we need the Ukrainian dancers anyway? Why do we need them at all? Can't this have just been about creating an atmosphere for the men to love each other again, for the men to find an exercise in vulnerability? And that is, if we're looking for places for the stars to fall for me, this is it. That I don't think it was a useful enough story element to have the women come in and dance for these men. It is the place that makes the men look the worst. It makes them look most played in a movie where they clearly live at an emotional high, but they don't look quite as silly in the rest of the film as they do here, where they just completely let go. And I found it sort of distasteful and unnecessary.
I guess for me, it was there were a couple things that I feel like, I'm trying to remember if the trailer made it feel like this or if it's a line in the movie and I'm just forgetting it right now. But I felt like the women said, you don't get any sex from us until you stop all of this. And that might have been something that I remembered from the trailer. I can't remember. But basically, not letting the men have them while all of this other stuff was going on. And so that was an element that for some reason is in my head, but I really honestly don't even remember a scene in the movie where they actually said that, other than Amal basically kicking everybody out and shutting her own potential relationship doors with Rabeb because he's just, being a tool. And they really kind of pretty permanently seemed to shut that door between the two of them over the course of the film. But I felt like if anything was going on with the dancers, it really was more than anything something that they could just use as a distraction for the men, so that the men kind of stopped what they were doing and just had something else to focus on while the women figured things out. Like, that's kind of where I ended with it. Like, it wasn't perfect, but neither was the pretend miracle from the Virgin Mary. And these women had no idea. They were just throwing things at the wall, hoping one of these things would eventually stick. And so, sure, it didn't end up necessarily working for them, but I didn't find it to be a problem per se, because they didn't know. And they were just like, well, let's try this and see if somehow we can use this to our advantage. So that's kind of how I read it. It wasn't perfect. I didn't hate it, but yeah.
Well, I don't remember any of those lines either, and I haven't watched the trailer. So what you're saying is, to me, a fantasy because it didn't make it into the story, and that's my problem. It is a clumsy use of a tool that wasn't really a commitment, and they're not. I get it that she probably didn't want to rewrite Lysistrata and do that again, but I just think it's one of those situations where you can choose to go broad comedy, or you can choose to kind of keep the movie kind of in world. And she chose broad comedy, and it didn't work as well for me.
I didn't feel like it was ever really quite broad comedy. I just felt like it was, it was fun, and it was just, kind of a little bit of entertaining. But it was, regardless, the story element of it wasn't as strong as it could have been.
Yeah, but it is a story element that is ultimately super brief in the movie, and I don't have
they're there for the whole film.
No. I'm really talking about the big dance number at the end, like when they come in and start doing their dance. Like that's the part that just felt like we already had a resolution and we're adding more to it, and it felt like a hat on a hat. Like I already felt like I knew where it was going, and I was okay with it. I was happy with it, and then we added this dance number, and I just couldn't. By the end of it, I couldn't conceive of why. It never answered the question, why am I seeing this? It was fine. It was fine.
It's weird that's the part that irks you, because I just felt like that integrated well with the musical of making all the other stuff. So none of that bugged me. Kind of at the end there. It's just because they were there for so long, like that's the element that was, more perplexing for me, because I'm like, what's the end game to have these women here for such a long period of time?
Exactly. And it wasn't worth it to me. Like, it wasn't worth it to have that end game of having the women there to do that dance, to hire the women. It was a pointless aside to me in the movie. That's like, why do we have to keep dealing with these Ukrainian dancers? It felt like there was enough movie without them. That's ultimately the thing for me. They had all these great capers to distract the men, and I just felt like, okay, here, let's do this. The violence, I've already said, the violence comes from outside the village. Isn't it a more interesting lesson if the resolution to the challenge of the strife comes from inside the village? Why do they need the outside sexy dancers to come in and show them what they really have? Which was what? What is the point of that? I don't know what they really have. They were all high on hash. Just talking about it with you, just watching you defend that line makes me more of an antagonist to it.
Which line?
Of having the women there in the first place.
I don't know.
That's right. That's exactly right. You can't defend it.
Even
though they got... Never mind. Some of the jokes, they just write themselves and probably shouldn't. So I'm gonna stop talking. So anyway, that was a challenge for me. But ultimately, I really like the way that this movie attempts to create a village, a world where this is a group of people who is really striving to solve their own problems and not get involved in, the broader conflict. It's a reminder of humanity, and that's what these mothers are trying to do. These mothers and sisters is to remind the men of the humanity that exists in the village, and I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
As far as direction goes, I know you haven't seen any. You're not a Labaki head. You haven't seen anything else.
I'm not a Labuk, yeah.
By her as a filmmaker, and I'm assuming you also haven't seen anything else that she has been in, because I think she started as an actress before she went on to start directing.
Yeah, no, I'm a first timer.
Yeah. In context of how the film was directed, was there anything that kind of struck you?
I thought it was lovely, and I go back to the flashback, or to the fantasy scene where she's lusting over Robert and they're dancing on the ladder and stuff. I thought that was really lovely, and cutting in all those shots of the ladder swinging, it was such a visual candy that tossed my brain in new directions that I thought was really fun. The comedy, the way she shoots the village, the way she shoots compressed spaces. I think we get a real high point in that final musical number where they're cooking. It is luscious treatment of breads and doughs and natch hashish. And so I really loved it. And like you, I mean, I know you've seen more than I have, but like you, I want to see more of what she does. Because I think she has a wonderful eye. I enjoyed being in this world sort of through her eye.
Well, paired with Christoph Offenstein was the cinematographer on the film. They did bring that magical feel to it. Like when that scene you were talking about, the musical between Amal and Rabet in Amal's shop. What I loved about that is, I mean, Rabet is there to kind of do work on the walls, and he's sanding down the walls to kind of clean them up, and I'm assuming he's going to repaint them at some point. But what I love about that is, as he's sanding, it's creating that kind of like that white dust in the air, which then they were able to use in kind of the musical element of it, because it kind of created that softer look, and you kind of have that, it almost was like this like dreamy feel to it. And so I really love the way that they found those elements. Same thing when they're cooking, you kind of got those little puffs of flour and everything. And so it was nice to find ways to use those elements to their advantage with the lighting and everything else to kind of give it that real beautiful glow. And one of my favorite moments in the film was when all of the women are with all of the Ukrainian dancers, And they're all what looks like by the waterfront. And they're kind of sitting there. They've got their umbrellas. All these Ukrainian women have these really colorful bathing suits on, and they're all just sitting there by the water, and they're just relaxing and enjoying themselves. And then you realize, I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's a lake nearby. Like, where are they? And then you realize it's just like a hole in the ground that the men must have dug at some point. And you just see all the men and the boys and everyone just like bringing buckets of water to put in here just so these women can have a place where they can relax and have some comfort. And I found that so funny. But I also loved the way that it was constructed with the colors and you're initially getting it from a very, straight on perspective. So you don't see all of the reality of it. And it really did kind of paint a much more magical place. And so I loved those little things, that the way that she played with that, it worked in context of continuing this magical realist world that she was crafting here.
But we can't forget, if you're going to do the setup to the joke, we have to talk about the punchline, which is that the women all got horrifically sunburned. And I was in stitches because that is that example of grounding the magical realism, grounding the lengths to which the men went to make sure that they could sort of have a vacation in their little village. And ultimately they paid the dermatological price.
The Ukrainian dancers, not the women in the village were
because
smart
all the other
enough.
women were dressed. Yeah, they were smart about it. Yeah. It was really great.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed all of that. And then Khaled Muzanar did the music, and that's Nadine Labaki's husband. And again, just building in to kind of create something that where all of a sudden it just feels like, oh, they could just fall into song here and it would feel natural. Like it worked. It really felt very natural, the way that all of this was built together to create this little bubble of a world that we're in.
Scene, another good scene alert, good scene flag. When Nassim's mom, so we've already had the setup where they've made they've set up the miracle, right, of the crying mother, Virgin Mary, right?
Yes.
In the church. Okay. And then we come back and Nassim's mom goes in and steps up to the Virgin Mary and says, "Come down from there." And it's like picking a fight with her. And I thought that was such an incredible sequence for so many reasons, not the least of which she's dressed like the Virgin Mary. Like they are a mirror image of each other as she is sort of cursing her, asking her down, taunting her. And then I think, am I right that the statue was crying?
Yeah.
She walked away?
She was crying blood. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was, I thought, again, in the spirit of fantastical realism, that was a real high point for me, that scene. And I think Nassim's mother was particularly well suited to play that role. She was great, very powerful. This
was an interesting location too. I guess they filmed this in a town in Lebanon called Taiba, and specifically because this town contains a church next to a mosque. And that was very important in kind of the context of this story, is kind of having that bifurcated feel as often as possible. And that's something like right at the beginning, as you're hearing this wonderful opening monologue, you get an opening and closing monologue, which also both feel very much lyrical, the way that they're written. It's kind of like a rhymey poem sort of thing, which I really enjoyed. The way that unfolded, like it felt so much like a divided town, like you would see in like an animated film or something. Like you've got the left half is one and the right half is another, and the film just defined that so well. Like at the beginning, you see the church on the left and the mosque on the right, and it's very split. And at the cemetery, it's the same thing. It's like all the Christians are buried on the left and all the Muslims are buried on the right. And I loved that divided feel. And again, like these are the things that in context of the way that she was building this world, it works to define this story. And so I felt all of that just like it was so designed that it just like every little piece like that just helped kind of craft this world. So it was, I don't know. It worked exceptionally for me, all of these elements.
So you're a fan is what you're saying.
I guess I'm a Labaki.
Where are the quibbles? Where are the quibbles?
I have,
as I said, I predicted that there would be quibbles.
Well, I had some quibbles with the women, with the Ukrainian dancers, because I wasn't completely clear why they were there for so long.
Good.
But it was, it wasn't a huge issue. I still felt like it was all right. I guess I would say I can't decide if I really wanted there to be, I kind of feel like I did want there to be, because of this musical element, some form of a more romantic resolution between Amal and Rabah. Like, I liked those characters at the beginning, and I wanted to feel like it was going to grow into something at the end. And I don't feel like we ever quite got that. And I'm not sure if I meant to care about that or what. Does that bother you at all? Or
it's funny. It didn't until you said it. Like then you just brought it up, and now what I imagined was a Tom Hanks Meg Ryan resolution. And I don't think we were going to get that. I don't think that was ultimately the story. So,
but I mean, but we have this romantic song between the two of them. They're clearly drawn to each other, even though, as people, they are on opposite sides of this religious divide in the town, right? And so that was kind of an interesting element to bring up, and they never use it in the story as a form of resolution. But that doesn't seem to bother you.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But honestly, is it telling that I didn't catch it?
Yeah, maybe.
Like I didn't catch it at all. And you're right. They invested a lot. They gave a beautiful scene and a song to these people as a couple. And there is no payoff.
The only payoff is it just gets worse and worse and worse, is my recollection goes. Because at some point they pretty much kind of force Rabah to take in one of the dancers. Even at that time, there is still, sharp words going back and forth between the two of them about, as they're doing this translation bit between, she won't make you breakfast. I won't eat anything that she cooks me, or whatever, that whole little bit. But I feel like, was that the last thing? Is there something else between the two of them?
No, I think that was the last thing. And I sort of walked away from that, like that little translation bit. I don't know if it translated well for me, because I came away from that entire experience thinking, I don't think he's changed at all. I don't think he understands what opportunity he's missing.
Yeah, right.
Like, I think he's saying things that she might be taking as innuendo somehow, or like mistaking the actual words that he's saying, when really he means what he's saying right now.
Yeah.
And it's not great. And I imagine there is some sort of cultural interpretation that I'm missing, but he seems like by the end of that sequence, I walk away thinking he's an ass. Yeah. I'm glad she is absolved of him. And maybe that's why I didn't think about the romantic resolution.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, that's certainly an element that I would love to hear some commentary or something from Labaki about the decisions there, because it did feel like a big story element, especially in this magical, realist, musical story setting with a potential love song between the two of them that gets completely kiboshed by the time we get to the end.
Yeah.
Like, what was the decision going down that road instead of finding a way to use that? Because again, that could have been a story element that was used to bring the two sides together, but it wasn't.
Yeah. But it didn't. That's interesting. And I think maybe that would have been an easy route, because romance always brings people together. I think where they went with the drugs and the sexy dancing and swapping religions at the end, maybe ultimately is more interesting and more of a surprise than hanging your hat on romantic resolution of one couple that brings a village together.
Drugs, sexy dancing, and religion swapping. I tell you, that's clearly what the world needs more of.
What the world? Okay. We need to wrap this up.
All right. We will be right back, everybody. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Itai Armon. Oriel Novella and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. How to do it award season, Andrew?
It wasn't a huge award film, not like Capernaum was a few years later. This film had 9 wins with 5 other nominations. At Cannes, it did receive the Francois Chalet Award. Am I saying that right? Francois Chalet. This is at the Cannes Film Festival. Labaki received this. It was created to pay tribute to the French journalist and film historian Francois Chalet. And it is given to films dedicated to the values of life affirmation and of journalism, and highlights the presence of journalists at Cannes itself. So it's in the value of life affirmation. That is the reason that this film received that award. Also, it received at the special mention at the prize of the ecumenical jury. Cannes has so many things. Like, what are all of these things?
It's just it's a real dumpster fire of awards.
I tell you, the prize
they
of
just
the
make stuff up.
The prize of the ecumenical jury. It's an independent film award for feature-length films shown at major international film festivals since '73, created by Christian filmmakers, film critics, and other film professionals. The objective is to honor works of artistic quality which witnesses the power of film to reveal the mysterious depths of human beings through what concerns them, their hurts and failings, as well as their hopes. Wow.
That's a lot for a description.
That's what the prize of the ecumenical jury. They won a special mention and had this to say: the women of a small isolated village are ready to do anything to preserve peace between the two communities that are living there together. With much delicacy, Nadine Labaki succeeds in offering a poetic tale balancing carefully between comedy and tragedy, provoking an emotion that is turned toward hope. Last but not least, it was nominated for Un Certain Regard, which again is a best first or second feature film, and Labaki lost this. It was the tie between Ararong and Stopped on the Track, which we talked about with one of our others in this particular series. At TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, the film won the People's Choice Award, and at the Stockholm Film Festival, the film won the Bronze Horse for Best Script. I love that they do this. They have the motivation of the jury for these awards. The jury said, in an unsentimental way, this film is able to engage us in the fate of these characters and the consequences of living with differences. The story makes us laugh, cry, and in a humorous way ask ourselves, would war exist if women ruled the world? I love that. Also, it won the Bronze Horse for Best Music. And the jury had this to say: like the film itself, the strength of the score lies in its ability to combine entertainment with content, accessibility with questioning, and drama with musical. And last but not least, it was nominated for Best Film, but it lost to Oslo August 31st, which that is a gut punch of a movie, let me tell you.
Yes. How to do it at the box office? Did the numbers make up for its loss in awards?
Well, Labaki did have a budget of 4.5 million euros, or $6.5 million, which is about 7.6 million in today's dollars. Like so many movies in this particular series, this movie premiered at Cannes, and then it continued its festival run, opening in its home country of Lebanon September 22nd, 2011. It finally opened in the U.S. on May 11th, 2012, opposite Dark Shadows and The Dictator. The movie did not do much business domestically, earning only about $532,000, but internationally it did really well for itself, becoming the highest-grossing Lebanese film until Labaki's next film, Capernaum, bumped it. It earned just over $20 million internationally for a total gross in today's dollars of $23.9 million, and that lands the film with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $148,000.
Well, that's something.
Yeah.
It's in the positive on the APFM.
It is. She's quite the successful filmmaker coming out of Lebanon. Which is great.
Yeah. Well, she's wonderful. I really enjoyed the movie. So glad it was on the list. And, we've had some dark movies. This is a movie about a dark subject that actually turns out to be a fairly light movie. And I like it, that it was a thinker about some tough stuff, but under enough of a lens that it didn't get mired in its own darkness.
No, it was a real surprise. I just really did not know what to expect, and I had a great time with it. So I'm very glad that this was on our list, and certainly I want to go back and see Labaki's first film, Caramel, which came out in 2007, just to kind of, complete my Labaki head fandom.
Oh, yeah, you absolutely need to do that. We'll be right back for our ratings, but first, we got the trailer for our next week's movie. What are we talking about?
Next week, we're going to talk about Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, which will be the first Bollywood film that we will have discussed on the show.
अबीरा, मैं स्पेन नहीं आ सकता। अर्जुन यार, तू मेरी बैचलर ट्रिप पे मुझे टांग दे रहा है। तू इतना सेंटी क्यों हो रहा है यार? It's my work. जाएंगे तो तीनों साथ जाएंगे, वरना
रोड ट्रिप स्पेन में। उन्होंने कॉलेज में कोई पैक्ट बनाया था कि हर एक अपनी मर्जी का एडवेंचर स्पॉट चूज करेगा और बाकी दोनों को उसमें पार्टिसिपेट करना ही होगा।
क्या?
3 हफ्ते। You know how these boys are यार। बैचलर पार्टीज में सब पागलों की तरह बिहेव करते हैं।
हे, तुम्हारा नाम क्या है?
लैला।
दोस्त मुझे मजनू बुला।
ना मैं समझा ना मैं जाना जो भी तुमने मुझसे कहा है सेन्योरिटा।
ये चाहत की मोहब्बत। वैसे तुम्हें किस टाइप की लड़की अच्छी लगती? सारी दुनिया में एक ही जुबान है सेन्योरिटा।
तुम्हें कैसा लगेगा अगर मैं तुम्हारे बिना अपने दोस्तों के साथ कहीं चली गई?
मुझसे अब नजर ना फेरो। इतिहास के पन्नों में लिखा होगा कि मेरा पहला प्यार थी तुम।
पैसों के लिए शादी कर सकोगे?
कितने पैसे?
Really? लैला तुम्हारी दोस्त है?
वो हमारी डाइविंग इंस्ट्रक्टर है यार।
तुम्हारी जिंदगी बदलने वाली है।
जीना कोई तुमसे सीखे। मेरी जिंदगी तो जैसे बंद डिब्बे के अंदर कट रही है।
इंसान को डिब्बे में सिर्फ तब होना चाहिए जब वो मर चुका हो। शादी के बाद तुम कहाँ ऐसी बॉयज ट्रिप पे जाना चाहोगे?
Okay, we got to talk about Letterboxd.
Where do we go?
Where do we go on this one?
Letterboxd?
Yeah, where do we go now on our Letterboxd?
I just got to put this out there. Do you think that the women would have been successful if they just got all the men to just start using Letterboxd?
Possibly. The men.
Letterboxd
that's
the
what
solution?
the men needed is an outlet. They needed an outlet. And they didn't have it. Yeah. And that,
they could have rated that Hitchcock
there would be
they were watching.
Less violence in the world if men were on Letterboxd. More men were on Letterboxd. It's funny.
Oh my.
Okay, so how are you doing it?
I really don't have many quibbles with this film. It didn't quite suck me in as much as I wanted it to, but the end just stuck with me so successfully, like regardless of which version I'm reading, because apparently I'm seeing like 5 different ways that the movie ended in my head and they all work well. And so I really enjoy that. It wasn't 100% like 5-star for me, but I feel like 4 stars and a heart I feel really good about with this film. And it's a film that I don't think is going to disappear from my head quickly. Like there's so many little moments in this film that just had magic. And so I was really drawn to it. So 4 stars and a heart.
Yeah. I think my real conflict is in with the sexy dancing ladies and just how much of a star loss does that give me? Because overall, the feeling of the film was fantastic, and I really enjoyed my experience with it. It was fun. It was exactly the kind of vibe that what are some of that like a good Audrey Tautou movie gives me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that sense of fun, even if it's dealing with some darkness. Could it be a 4.5-star movie for me? There's definitely a heart. But is it 4 or 4.5? I think I'm gonna feel the wave of optimism, Andy, and I'm gonna go 4.5 stars.
Wow, look at you. 4.5 and a heart. That's great.
Yep.
I'm really happy that this film landed on our list. I did not know about this. And so I was thrilled to just discover this film. It felt like, just a fresh voice with a point. And I really enjoyed the chance to kind of talk about this film and think about it. It's a unique one.
So what did you think about Where Do We Go Now? We want to know. Hop into the Show Talk channel on Discord. We'll be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins. Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay, you went with the international route.
I did.
I'm very excited about that. I feel like you should go first as a result.
Well, I ended up with Asia's review from earlier this year, and Asia had this to say. She's Turkish, and said, "Settled in my heart like a stone." Oof, I like that start. An all-around excellent movie. It is both very enjoyable and one of the most painful things I have ever seen in my life. Jokes, dances, music. Women are always beautiful. Deaths, screams, loneliness breaks the heart. Oof. There you go. Yeah.
That's poetry.
Got some stuff going on in there. Yeah.
So much. Mine is from the good Jonathan White. A kind reviewer from Ontario, Canada, who writes, and this isn't going to play well on a podcast, so I'll have to return and do some spelling later. A catch-up review for a film I relished. Things were busy just after I watched this 2011 TIFF Surprise People's Choice winner last week. It's a lovely Lebanese story of differences and commonalities in a tiny community composed of Muslims and Christians. I really wish I'd made better notes about this one. It's both wonderful and flawed, but my strongest remembrance is that director, co-writer, co-star Nadine Labaki is a director to watch. Although it's from 7 years ago, this review was written in 2018, the message it delivers couldn't be more timely. Highly recommended. A catch-up review for a film I relished. Probably don't even need to spell it if I lean in on it like that.
Yeah.
Catch-up and relish. Jonathan, you're delightful.
Very peculiar. Very peculiar. But I do enjoy it, yes.
I do too. I relish it too. I catch up it. Thanks, Letterboxd. Make ketchup funny again, Andy. New hats.
When was ketchup not funny, Pete?
When was ketchup? It's the funniest condiment.
That's what they say.
Andy, it's hard to believe we've been having weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals has links to purchase the source material behind our adapted film discussions. Your purchases there help support the show at no extra cost.
For the entirety of season 11, we featured films directed by women.
The only exceptions were some of our member bonus episodes.
We talked about The Lure for our horror debuts series, which is a very loose adaptation of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen.
Definitely miles from the Disney versions.
For our 10-year anniversary series, we covered We Need to Talk About Kevin, taken from the Lionel Shriver novel.
Man, that was brilliant.
And horrifying.
Yeah. The Journalist series included Merrily We Go to Hell and The Weight of Water, adapted from Anita Shreve's bestseller.
We filled some gaps in previous series with member bonus episodes on adaptations like Malcolm X, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, Cactus Flower, Wild at Heart, Life Force, and The Blues Brothers.
Our John Hurd series looked at a trio of adaptations: Chilly Scenes of Winter from the novel by Anne Beatty, Awakenings based on Oliver Sacks' nonfiction book, and Rambling Rose adapted from the Calder Willingham novel.
2 films in our coming-of-age debuts series were adapted from books: The Virgin Suicides from Jeffrey Eugenides, and The Diary of a Teenage Girl, Phoebe Glockner's graphic novel.
We had Queen of Katwe for our sports series based on Tim Crothers' nonfiction book.
And Clueless kicked off our 90s comedy series, loosely adapted from Jane Austen's Emma.
It totally took place in the 90s, though. Find all of these books and more adaptations on our originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today.